Hi, this is Hannah. Welcome back to my channel, Savage Reads, and I am going to do a bit of a different video today. So a couple years ago, I went through all of the books that I had read and marked on Goodreads and tried to figure out which authors was I reading multiple times without even realizing it. And do I like them? Trying to evaluate what authors actually work for me and which ones don't. And so I am going to link that video down below because it has a lot of my very favorite authors, and I have read more from those authors since I made that video. I'm looking at Patrick Radden Keefe, David Sedaris, all these authors that I go back to time and time again. And so I thought that it would probably be worthwhile to go through my books again, see if there's more authors that I am reading quite a bit from, and how I feel about them. And so I am going to go through a list of some of my most read authors. This is not a comprehensive list because I did not want to go over any of the same authors that I talked about in the last video from 2 years ago. So make sure to check that one out if you want more author recommendations. And this also is only going with the books that I have marked on Goodreads since 2017. Before that, I hadn't marked anything on Goodreads. And so some of these authors I actually have read more books from than the ones that I'm going to talk about, and some authors I have read a lot from, but in the past, and I'm not going to be talking about them today. I am also excluding authors where I have read a lot of books from them, but it's because they were all part of a series. And so excluding series, just what authors am I returning for these standalone books over and over again? So let's jump into the first author. Now, the first author that I want to talk about is Terry Pratchett. Now, Terry Pratchett was a British author known for his humor and for the Discworld series. And in 2019, I went through quite a few of his books. I read Good Omens, which was a collaboration with Neil Gaiman, and I read The World of Pooh, Dodger, and overall, I enjoyed them. But 2019, I do not remember these books very well. I don't know if any of these books have stuck with me over the long haul, but I always gave them a very solid rating and had a good time reading them. And so I would not be averse to picking up another book by Terry Pratchett, but it has been a little while and I don't know if the sticking power is quite there for me. We're moving from Pratchett to Patchett. Patchett is an excellent author based out of Nashville, Tennessee, and I read Bel Canto, The Dutch House, Commonwealth, and These Precious Days. These Precious Days is more of personal essays where the other books were fictional novels. I read all of these books in 2022, and they also were across the board like 4 stars, really solid reads for me. The one that sticks out the most was Bel Canto. And I think the reason for me why that worked the best was not only was it this slow learning about the characters and really delving into these characters' motivations, it had a sense of urgency because of the setup. And I really appreciated that because I do think that you need to be in the mood for an Ann Patchett book because it is really going to just work you through these characters' emotions and how they feel and move you along. And sometimes that can be a little boring if you're in the wrong state of mind. But overall, I think any book by Ann Patchett is going to be a very solid read. The next author I want to talk about is Barbara Kingsolver. Barbara Kingsolver lives in Virginia, but has lived in many places in the world, and she has written quite a few books. So from her, I have read Demon Copperhead, The Lacuna, Unsheltered, and The Poisonwood Bible. The Poisonwood Bible is the first book that I read from her back in, I think, 2018. And her other books I read in 2022, 2023. And she is excellent. Most of her books end up being 5-star reads for me, sometimes 4 stars, but they're always worth picking up. I think so many people here on BookTube have talked about Demon Copperhead and how much they love it. And I think one of my favorites was actually The Laguna. I thought that was a very interesting story, and Barbara Kingsolver is great at doing those stories that span a lifetime. And they're really going to delve into the characters, but how they grow and change over time. And it's very interesting to watch. So out of the books that I have read from Barbara Kingsolver, I'm very happy, and I would not feel bad picking up another one. So if you have another favorite Barbara Kingsolver book, let me know, because more books from her is definitely something that I would like to pursue. The next author that I would like to talk about is John Green. Now, I have been a follower of John Green for many years. As a teenager, young adult, I loved John Green's social media presence. I have adored Crash Course and the different things that he does to promote education. And so I really appreciate all the things that John Green has done. Now, I read quite a few books of his as a teenager and young adult, and in the past few years, since 2017, I have picked up Turtles All the Way Down, Will Grayson, Let It Snow, and the Anthropocene Reviewed. Now, these books, as an adult reading them, end up being a little bit more of a mixed bag. I think as a teenager, I adored any of his books that I could pick up, but as an adult, some of them don't quite work well for me, and I think it's because he is definitely a YA author, and I think that his books really appeal to young adults. And it's not to say that you can't find connection or things in his books. The Anthropocene Reviewed is geared more towards adults and is probably my favorite of his books that I have read in the past few years, but I do think that his books probably are more successful for the intended audience. I don't think I'm going to be picking up any more John Green books in the near future, but if he does release any more books aimed towards adults, I will be first on the list to read that. Now, this list would not be complete without Neil Gaiman, and he is an English author who writes all sorts of things: comic books, screenplays, novels. He has written quite a bit, and every time I pick up a book by Neil Gaiman, I am happy that I did. I have a good time. So the ones that I've picked up since 2017 are Neverwhere, The Graveyard Book, Norse Mythology, Fortunately the Milk, The Ocean at the End of the Lane, and Good Omens. Now, they end up averaging at almost 5 stars. I always enjoy picking up a Neil Gaiman book. I read quite a few others as well when I was younger that didn't make it on this list, and I always end up having a good time. My weird thing with him, though, is I almost prefer the screen adaptations. It's one where I enjoy the book, I have a great time, but I can see in my head how it would be better if I was watching it, and when I watch it, I'm just delighted. I think that his books translate really well to visual formats, which is strange, but I'm always happy to pick up a book from him because anything I've picked up just sweeps me off into a different fantasy world. Something that I really appreciate is that they are very accessible fantasy. I feel like you can pick it up, read a book, be swept away, and not have to learn a whole new vocabulary. You're not going into some sort of high fantasy where you're going to really have to delve into these different systems and these different ideas and these different planets or whatever else it is. You can pick it up and just feel like your everyday is more magical than it was. And so that is something that I really like about his books. And the humor throughout them is always just a delight. So highly recommend any book by Neil Gaiman, and let me know what your favorite Neil Gaiman book is. I would be happy to pick up more if I haven't already read them. Now I want to talk about the Canadian author Simone St. James, and she tends to write mysteries, ghost stories, thriller type books, and usually I have a fun time. The books that I have picked up from her are The Haunting of Maddie Clare, The Book of Cold Cases, and The Sundown Motel. And I think my least favorite out of these was The Haunting of Maddie Clare. That was my most recent read because typically the other two books that I've picked up from Simone St. have been really fun ghost story type books. I just think that The Haunting of Maddie Clare felt more ghost story, less mystery, and I don't think that worked for me. I like a strong mystery going through these kinds of books. So I'm a little mixed. Out of these three books, one hasn't worked. The other two were pretty okay 4-star ones. And so I'm a little hesitant to pick up another book by the same author. But I know that if I do, I will probably have a good time, even if I don't love it. The next author is Maggie O'Farrell. She is from Ireland and has written some very interesting books. The ones that I have read are The Marriage Portrait, Hamnet, and I Am. Once this video goes up, I probably will have finished the next one as well, The Vanishing Act of Esme Lennox, which I am currently reading. Her books end up being very solid reads for me. I would not hesitate to pick up another book by her. The book that somehow worked the best for me was I Am, which was more of her memoir in short stories. And I actually connected with that a lot more than her novels, which is surprising because her novels are really solid, good. I would say, like, for me, 4-star reads across the board. I know a lot of people have loved The Marriage Portrait and Hamnet. They have been at the top of the list, 5 stars. For me, maybe closer to 4 stars, but still a really good read. I just think I Am ended up being something I connected to a lot more and was a 5-star read for me. So I would not hesitate to pick up another book by Maggie O'Farrell in the future. She is an excellent author. Now let's jump into a few authors that are some of my favorite nonfiction authors. The first one I want to talk about is Siddhartha Mukherjee, and he is from India, and he has so many qualifications behind his name. He is a cancer physician and a researcher. He has worked with Columbia University. He's a cancer physician at Columbia University Medical Center, a Rhodes Scholar. He graduated from Stanford University, University of Oxford, Harvard Medical School, and he has written for Nature, New England Journal of Medicine, New York Times. He is pretty well qualified to talk about what he talks about. And the books that I have read by him are The Song of the Cell, The Gene, and The Emperor of All Maladies. Now, these were 5-star reads across the board. I highly recommend anything that he's written, and I would pick up another book by him in a heartbeat. These books are deep in depth. The book about cancer was so in depth, talking about the history of cancer and the different treatments and what the future looks like, and that was excellent. And The Song of the Cell and The Gene, I was so worried. I thought that they would overlap too much. You know, when you get an author that writes about things that they know and they tend to repeat over and over some of the same information, this was not the case. He managed to get 2 different books that were engaging and informative and important. Highly recommend anything by this author if you want some good books about genetics and medicine. Pick up a book by Siddhartha Mukherjee. The next author is Candice Millard. Now, she was a writer and editor for National Geographic, and I have read her books Destiny of the Republic, The River of Doubt, and River of the Gods. I read all 3 of these last year in 2023, and across all of these books, they were 5-star reads. Just excellent, in-depth looks at parts of history that I didn't really know, and she not only has the ability to give you the information about these historical events that you might not know a lot about, but she does it in a way that makes you interested and engaged and really connect to the people that are talked about, and she manages to make it feel relevant and important. If you like adventures, I think pick up a Candice Millard book. I think even the book about Destiny of the Republic, which wasn't really focusing on discovery expeditions, you still feel like you were brought along an adventure. And so she does such a great job. I would not hesitate at all to pick up any book by Candice Millard. Now, lastly, I would like to chat about Jared Diamond. Jared Diamond is a scientist and historian and an author, and he has written quite a few books. The ones that I read all last year were The Third Chimpanzee, The World Until Yesterday, and Guns, Germs, and Steel. Now, these individually were all really interesting books, but I'm done with Jared Diamond. Do you know why? Because if you read one, you feel like you've read them all. Reading each of these individually was fine, but it started to feel like the same information just presented and packaged in a slightly different way. And I don't know if that is a common experience for readers of Jared Diamond. He has done a lot of research in New Guinea, and he really leans on that in a lot of his books, and so much of it does seem to be going over the same information, just repackaged in a different way. All of these books are talking about the history of the world broadly and how things have changed over time, and it just starts to feel a little much. So, do I recommend Jared Diamond? Yes, I think pick up a Jared Diamond book. They're great pop science books. They will get you really sucked into the subject. You'll feel like you understand a little bit, and they're really interesting and fun to read. But do I think you need to read more than one? No, I read 3 and I think it was a bit overkill. So honestly, I think I'm kind of done, even though like if we go star rating wise, it ends up being pretty high. I'm just not sure if you need to keep going with this same thing. And those are some of the authors that I have read quite a few books from. I am hoping that I can expand that list, and in another couple years, I will have some more authors that I want to talk about that I've read more than 2 books from. So if you have any thoughts on these authors, am I right? Am I wrong? What are some of your favorite authors that you go back to time and time again? Let me know in the comments down below. I will also link that first video if you want some of my other very favorite authors that I continually go back to. And I will see you all on the next video.